Hello everyone and welcome to your Saturn placement. After doing Jupiter, I really wanted to get to this one, but of course, just takes time, like the lesson of Saturn. As someone who's kind of an optimist, I guess I would call myself, and I like to believe in the positive things and I kind of love Disneyland. The serious nature of Saturn was probably the last planet that I really delved into. But there's so much to learn here. Saturn is the realist. It's here to teach you that lifelong lesson. So welcome, my fellow masochists. You have made it to the harshness of reality. I'll make it as pleasant as possible. If you want some feel-good vibes, stop now and watch the Jupiter videos. Just kidding. Saturn is called malefic because it's a place of hardship. Hardships are not random. They're not just the gods laughing at us, or maybe they are, but they are there to teach us a lesson. All of these lessons throughout all of these years, over time, the long haul of Saturn will teach us mastery. So what started as one of your greatest weaknesses will become one of your greatest strengths. When I did the Jupiter videos, one of the comments was that since I presented Jupiter as a superpower, I should present Saturn as Kryptonite. I thought that was such a great idea. Now, I don't know much about the Superman comics, but I do know enough to know what Kryptonite is. If Superman, over time, builds up his immunity to Kryptonite, then that is exactly what Saturn is all about. I also got some criticism for having so much about the actual planet and not as much about the specific traits of your placement. So I'm going to put more in there. But to know about the planet itself is important because it teaches you what's the difference between having a Saturn in Scorpio versus a Saturn ascendant. And when I was first learning about astrology, that was probably the thing that confused me the most. So that is why I spend so much time. Saturn is the slow burn. It's the delayed effect. Usually this area is something that we care so much about, but it seems so unobtainable. And then when we finally get there, we will look back and say it's really worth the journey. This is an area that's going to require dedication, patience, and time. You might feel like your father figure, or God isn't bringing you anything in this area. Like you put so much effort and then it's just not rewarded like Jupiter is. You have to do all of the work, and it's true. There are no spiritual guides or beings that are going to give you that extra boost in this area. This is good old-fashioned blood, sweat, and tears. It's an area that has to be aged like a fine wine. There's also often a lot of shame, which is a huge obstacle. There's this inner voice, you shouldn't do this. Push and pull of something you want, but something you feel is shameful. And for some people, Saturn is mostly about getting past that kind of shame in that area. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. So let's get into your Saturn placements. Saturn in Scorpio, the notorious Scorpio. All right, so the mantra that I think would be really beneficial to you in your life would be, I will turn the darkness into light. I am a light worker that guides my life as well as others. When people think of Scorpio, they think of darkness, but I also think of pure light. So when Saturn is your life's work and Scorpio is intensity, it is your choice whether your life's work is a study of darkness and just stays in that darkness, or if it's a study of darkness that turns it into light. Scorpio is always a dichotomy of extremes because it's intensity. Those extremes are almost living side by side with each other. Some Saturn and Scorpios are people that are very vindictive, are very manipulative, and use other people, and very highly competitive, secretive, mean-spirited. And then there's the other side of Saturn in Scorpio, which is a person who is just almost painfully pure. Somebody who is a healer, whose life work is to turn the darkness into light. Most likely you had something in your upbringing that was intense, because this just doesn't come out of nowhere, right? You're not just drawn to this darkness just out of nowhere. So your life's work is you trying to work through darkness. This could be stuff from past lives, your childhood, or both. A Saturn Scorpio is often very secretive about their lifelong goals. very protective of these goals. And they will probably be working on them without really wanting other people to see what they're doing. You might not also be comfortable with people knowing too much about you. Some people might see you as spacey because you're hard to read, because you really put extra work to causing that interference so that people can't pick up on what you're up to. You have a very strong will and strong focus, and it's impossible for someone else to get you to go into a field or a career that you don't want to do. You don't make big decisions based on anyone else except for you. You're usually very committed to your long-term goals and will just keep going there with laser-like focus until you get there. Scorpio is a fixed sign, so it's very enduring. Sometimes it can be stubborn. Sometimes it might be really hard to change directions even if it's not working. You are a powerhouse when it comes to work, but it's not in an obvious sort of way. So some people might actually see you as lazy because Scorpio is not an earth sign. It is the opposite, a water sign. So your way of going about things is very mysterious. I guess you would say work smarter, not harder. There's a very strong intuitive nature to your work, an emotional power. You're also good at getting other people to do things for you. Now, sometimes this can be very positive because you see that that person actually would thrive and there's something where both people can benefit. On the dark side, though, this is where it turns into a manipulation of getting people to do the work for you. Some Scorpio in Saturn people have insecurities about their career. Maybe you had parents that really put some negative ideas into your head about your laziness or your combativeness, or just you weren't doing things their way. And so then you became like more defensive, hence why you became more secretive about everything, putting more energy towards just fighting and rebelling. And underneath that is an insecurity that maybe you don't have what it takes in this world. You've probably had some really harsh critics, maybe even some very vindictive people early on in life that have affected you. So there's definitely some healing to do in regards to you reaching these long-term goals. Scorpio loves control, especially when it's in Saturn, because Saturn is Capricorn energy. But the truth is that Scorpio is ultimately not about control, but it's about being a catalyst, an area of great change, which is difficult because Scorpio is so fixed, stubborn. But that ice will thaw and it will break open. Change feels like the greatest lack of control, which is why Scorpio is notorious, because it is the hardest sign and placement and positions to have. We never know what change is going to end up looking like. That's why it's called change. It's different, it's new, it's scary. But with Scorpio, when you see all of the darkness, there's nowhere to go but up. Saturn Scorpios, do not doubt your bravery and your courage. Something about the whole area of Saturn will be reborn for you. This could come in the form of a change of what reality is to you, what the real world is to you, what you want out of life, what you think the process is to get what you want out of life, how to achieve it. Something about this is going to be reborn in order for you to fulfill the Scorpio mastery. It will take you to a higher understanding. Maybe your power has been always getting people to do things for you, doing less work, working smarter, meaning manipulation. But now you're going to find that you have more goodwill towards others and you wouldn't want to harm anyone or what their life path is. And you use that same intuitive and psychological power, but you use it for the good of everyone around you. And this might actually karmically bring more to your life than you could have ever imagined. But with a Scorpio and Saturn, in some way, it is time for a rebirth in terms of your long-term goals. To cleanse and brighten and bring pure light to some of these concepts of reality, the real world, and what it takes to achieve, or what you're willing to do to achieve. Scorpio at its very darkest is pure pain, jealousy, revenge, victimization. And at its purest, it is the great sacrifice, the rebirth, the letting go of old ways. Since Scorpio represents other people on an emotional level and Saturn represents goals and the harshness of reality, it is likely that when you master this area, Other people will have a serious positive impact on helping you reach your long-term goals. People you didn't even know cared will help you transform the darkness into light. Your work could also be working in some field of turning darkness into light. Therapy for someone who's gone through traumas or death, or ER doctors, PTSD or abuse victims, someone who's been victimized and healing that to transform a toxic environment into a place of love. Early in life, like I said, you were probably seen as lazy or limited or held back in some way from pursuing your long-term goals. If you have Saturn in the 8th house, it's often like a cage. Maybe you had a relative that had very impressive worldly success, but deep down they were a miserable, depressed, or vindictive kind of person looking for scapegoats. With Scorpio or the 8th house in Saturn, you can be unaware of all of your strengths and all that you can accomplish in this life. You might think that you have to rely on others. And yes, others, like I said, they do karmically play into you achieving your great goals. But the first steps of it are often you relinquishing the belief that you need to rely on others, stepping into it in your own way, and then having the help of others when you least expected it. Become aware of your own business savvy and abilities. And remember that the intense experiences that you have gone through in your life have made you stronger and not weaker. And they can make you more positive as opposed to negative. You really don't have to have secret enemies or compete with others in order to validate your worth. With Scorpio and Saturn, often the hardest time in your life will lead you to a rebirth that brings about new realization and new success on a whole nother level. You might also find that you work best in the fields that involve subjects like death, birth, sex, abuse, taboos, detective work, just working on shining a light on the darkness. So hope you enjoyed my take on the light workers of Saturn in Scorpio, and come back for the next video.